Okay, we talked last week a little bit about the basics of the bouncing ball and how to give squash and stretch and weight and life in action. But really, at the end of the day, action is nothing and acting is everything. That's really what we're supposed to be doing here. It's making drama entertainment. I think that the difference between good animation and great animation is the difference is the amount of personality that the animator puts into his work. And so I like to spend a day just talking about the basics of acting, staging, and lip sync. And I feel like an animator's job is roughly divided into three categories. He has to be a good actor, good at caricaturing action, good at drawing. Now, a crap animator can't draw, can't move things, and can't act. A so-so animator can move things around. That's about it. A good animator can move things around well and draw well. And a great animator can move things, draw well, and act. And so, just like the bouncing ball is the basic building block of action, the cartoon take, is the basic building block of all acting in animation. So, what I'd like to show you run through how the anatomy of a take, and how that can be applied then to acting on a bigger sense. Acting is always reaction first and then action. And you keep going back and forth from action to reaction to action to reaction within one character, between other characters, and always, hopefully, in a conflict situation that builds to a climax and then has a beginning, middle, and end, and then a conclusion. And that's, by definition, drama. Unfortunately, we as animators start with a completely blank piece of paper. And so we are synthesizing life right from zero, from the ground up. So, because what we are doing is creating a 2D world that symbolizes a 3D world, we really do start with symbols. And our character will start out as a circle, but this is not a character. It doesn't take much to get us started, though. A simple mouth, you start to read that as a character, so already we are symbolizing life. A couple of eyes, and it is an entity. It doesn't have life yet, but there's a glimmer. You put some circles around the thing, and it's alive, but it's a zombie. It's not aware of the world around it. It's not looking or thinking. All it takes is just moving the eyes back and forth and around a little bit to bring the thing to life. Now, it's not acting because it has no opinion about what it's seeing. One of the mistakes I see a lot in animation is the guys will draw the character with the eyes, the pupils, directly in the middle. And that's something you should really never do, because that's great for when Louis and Cecilia get hypnotized, or a character is dead or knocked out, or thinking about something in its past. You know, if it thinks, it's lost in thought and therefore kind of zoned out. And that's a good symbol for that. But in general, day-to-day eye contact and interrelationship acting, you should steer away from letting the pupil drift away from the edge of the ball, the edge of the eye. So once you have the character looking about, it's not enough just to have him like that. He's got to have an opinion about what he sees, or else he's dead. And I see that often enough. It doesn't take much. It's just, either a smile or a frown, or whatever. But what his opinion is determines what kind of character he is. And you have to be very careful about what his reaction is, because it's very easy to fall into stereotypes, as we'll see. If the audience doesn't know what the character is thinking, like for example here, if the audience doesn't know, they will cease to care, and if they don't care about the character, they won't care about the story, and then your movie's lost. So it's important that at all times, even if your character isn't the main character in the scene, It should always have an opinion about what it is that it's seeing or listening to. I see that mistake again and again done in background characters where one character is doing all the main acting, and you have the other characters, the dweeb and the Elsas and the Woogs, just standing there with their eyes in the middle, no attitude, and they're dead. They're literally dead as characters. So make sure you have them focus their eye concentration, and make sure they have an attitude about what they're hearing, whether it's happy or sad or whatever you want. Let's take our character, though, and put him into a life-threatening situation. Let's say that our character is standing there and a bull elephant is charging at him. How is our character going to respond to this life-threatening situation? The stereotypical response is going to be, shock, horror, fear. But that's what I call thinking around the first corner. And really, that's just a stereotypical response. And stereotypes are symbols too, and it's very good to start with symbols, especially in the cartoon world. Stereotypes are good because they set up very quickly, and we all know stereotypes and stereotype reactions and stereotype acting. And it's good for characters that are only going to be on the screen for a few shots or very few scenes, because you want them to set up instantly. Oh, that's a goof, or oh, that's a he's smart, or he's stupid, or he's a nerd, or he's a strong bullet, strong man, or a cute character, or whatever. If the character's only on the screen for a few things, for a few shots, then go for the stereotypes every time, both in design and acting. But if the character's going to be on the screen for any length of time, like a Louis, then you have to, it's good to start with stereotypes, but it's better to start adding traits on top of it. And the best way I know how to do that is to compare him to actors that we know from movies. It's very easy then to say, oh, well, Louis is like, I don't know, who? So Leave It to Beaver or something, some kid we've seen on television. Something that we all know and can relate to. Or Rex is like John Goodman. If you have a handle that everybody knows, the director, the animators, the character designer, it gives you a place to start and build and get subtleties that you wouldn't normally get from a stereotype. So, here's our character. He sees a bull elephant charging at him, and you got to ask each character is going to react differently. And if, for example, it's a hero type, like a James Bond or a Indiana Jones, he sees the bull elephant, and his reaction is going to be one of, bull elephant. And then his action will be to pull out a gun and shoot it. But the action is not the acting. You set up the acting and personality in the reaction. Now remember that, because it'll become more complex later, but it's the reaction that determines the personality. So his first reaction is going to be, bull elephant, no problem. If, for example, it's a nervous nerd type, like a Woody Allen, he might go mad. He might gibber and tell jokes even, and giggle, or just sit there and short out. If, for example, it's a stupid goof, like perhaps dweeb might, if in a life-threatening situation, the goof is simply going to go, and that's his personality, and it's funny because you didn't expect it, and yet it's on modeling and character. You could compare this to, say, Gomer Pyle, if any of you know that character, who's that dumb character, or anybody you would know. You could start to reach out to those characters you've seen in other movies and start pulling traits and stuff. It could be a guy with a bad attitude, and here comes a bull elephant, it's about to kill him, and he goes, this is going to ruin my day. Like you could think Grumpy and Snow White might do that, or Walter Matthau might have that attitude, just sort of a bad attitude. But what you want to do is to start putting a take together. You need to think in terms of starting with one emotion and breaking to the reaction. So here's a neutral face, and it goes into, a negative reaction. This isn't very strong because you're going from neutral to negative. And so the trick is really going to be to search for opposite emotions at the beginning of the scene, before the reaction, so that you have contrast in attitude to the next emotion. How much you move and how far you move it is the art of animation, and is very, very dependent on the personality and the situation. But it's fair to say, this being cartoon world, push it as far as you can. It's always easy to come back. It's very difficult to get out there in the first place. So the trick then is to start with him smiling, so that when you go to the negative reaction, you've had a contrast in attitude from smile to frown. But in the interest of pushing it and getting a bigger change of shape, you want to start with a smile and go to a bigger negative reaction, one of horror and shock. So not only you've got a bigger shape change, but you've also got a bigger attitude change. And this is something that you have to be aware of, that because in the order of priority you want to act well, move things well, and drawing comes like third on the priority list, you get tangled up sometimes about the drawing. Sometimes it's easy to get worried about the drawing first. And so when you're acting, it's better to divide up the labor and just think acting first, and don't worry about the drawing. It was very liberating for me on Roger Rabbit when Dick Williams told me, he said, make a bad drawing. Just go there. Go to the expression you need and make a goddamn bad drawing. And if you say that to yourself, I'm going to make a bad drawing now, and I'm just going to worry about the emotion, you end up making a great drawing because you're so punching it with emotion that you get this thing that is off model, but boy, it's screaming with emotion, and that's more important than a good drawing. So don't be afraid. Go there, go all the way, make a bad drawing every time. And then if it really is a bad drawing, you can always come back and clean it up. But make drawing the third priority. Now, the problem with going from here to here is that there's no anticipation. And anticipation is crucial to preparing the eye. The audience will miss it. An audience is usually about 6 frames behind your animation. And so unless you give the audience that 4 or 6 frame buffer to get them prepared, then they'll miss it. And unless you hold that expression for a long time, they won't be with you. So what you got to do is, you've got to do an anticipation. And in doing so, what you've given this thing is the audience is prepared for a change. And you've also created a larger shape change, which gives the final drawing more punch and more readability. Also, a blink is a real good device to make a transition from one attitude to another. I don't know why, but it works every time. It just makes a transition. Again, I suppose it's preparing the eye for a change. Okay. In the interest of giving the action weight, you want to do the bouncing ball thing, where you go from your squash to an overlap, where the expression is exaggerated, and then you recoil back into your final pose. And just that one overlap gives the drawing a lot more power and weight and emphasis on the final picture. Now, the problem with this take, theoretically, this is about as far as most guys take it, and this is the mistake that most guys make, is what they're doing. The big mistake is that we're changing attitude in action, which is the cardinal mistake. You should always change attitude and then do your take. What happens, the other problem with this scene, and I'll get into that in a second, the other problem with this scene is that we don't know why he's taking. I don't understand the acting. It is just merely an action. You have to be very careful that the audience is understanding why he's behaving the way he's behaving. And not only understands it, but it has to be in line with his motive. And that's really important. You've got to ask yourself, what does this character want so badly that he's willing to risk his life to achieve it? And where that goes wrong is that if the doesn't adhere to his motive in every single scene, the audience won't understand why he's behaving the way he's behaving. And therefore, they will be confused, they won't be with the character, and therefore they won't be with the story, and they'll hate the movie. They'll hate the character, they'll hate the movie. There's so many examples of this. When the woman is being chased by the monster, the first thing she does, and this is 50s horror movies, the woman will trip and fall in front of the monster. Well, goddamn it, if any of us were being chased by a monster, we'd make every effort not to trip and fall. We wouldn't do it. And then they lay there on the ground going, no! We wouldn't do it. And it frustrates the audience because, that's not realistic behavior. It's a counter motive. She's fighting to get away from the monster. She wouldn't lay on the ground going, no. And it's not something we would do or anybody would do. So another example would be, anybody see Gilligan's Island? Is that something that came to England? Yeah, Gilligan's Island. I always hated Gilligan's Island because their primary motive, is to get off the island. And in every episode, Gilligan would always do something to prevent them from getting off the island. And it angered me because, well, goddammit, why is he behaving that way? Your primary motive is to get off the goddamn island, and why is he behaving so stupidly? You wouldn't do that. That's against his primary motive, and so therefore you don't understand his behavior, and therefore hate him for it, and then ultimately don't want to watch the show anymore because it's so stupid. And so it's important that the character have a very, very strong motive. You understand that, and you adhere to it on every single scene. So, getting back to the fact that this take is making the cardinal error of changing expression during a move. The way to fix that is to make the move happen. There we go. Now, what's happening here is he's making an attitude change without moving anything else. Nothing is moving except for the facial shift from happy to sad, and then the take. And that's where most guys forget in a take, is that you've got to show the attitude shift first, void of any other movement, and then the take, and then an action. Maybe running away or pulling out a gun or whatever the situation calls for. The face change is the biggest action in the screen. And so often I've seen scenes where they're doing the face change, but they're wiggling their hand over here or something like that. And it's distracting and pulling focus from the most important thing in the whole movie, which is the attitude change. Now, the problem with this is that we don't know why he's making an attitude change. So it's important that he see, hear, or think of something before there's an attitude change, and then the take, and then the action. So, what you need to add to this then, come on, there we go. What you need to add to this is, Okay, this is very, very simple. What we have here, life starts out with the character just in a happy pose because we know where we're going. We're going to a negative reaction. This whole thing could be reversed. You could start out unhappy, see something, hear something, think of something, and then go into a smiling take. But for the sake of this, he starts out positive. He sees something. Every time you do a transition, you go through blinks. Through a blink, up into a C, hold it for as long as you need to, make sure you don't shortchange this C, blinking into a negative response that moves slowly enough so that we can see it happen, and then you do your take. Now, what is weak on this animation is that the C, the point where he sees the bull elephant for the first time, is not accented strongly. And that's where you can do things like blink him, or move him forward, or wait a minute, I got a whole bunch of examples here. You can make his eyes bug out. You can put glasses on, adjust the glasses. I think we did that with Bleed, looking at the dinosaurs fading away into the fog. Pulling hair out of the eyes, pushing bushes back, or if it's hearing, that's a pretty stereotypical thing, and you really shouldn't do that, but you do in real life. You do, turn your ear to things and cock your head, and also, you can also put the eyes. Again, there's a good case where the eyes could go into the center of the pupil, because it would. Hang on a second, let's do it. Because when you are not using your eyes, come on, draw. There. See, when you're not using your eyes, when you're focusing on another sense, whether it's internally or hearing something, then the eyes could go into the center of the pupil, into the center of the ball, because you're not looking anymore. You're using other senses. You're either feeling or hearing or tasting or smelling or whatever. But or you could be thinking, and again, the eyes could be in the center. The scratching of the head thing is a very stereotypical thing, but if you'll notice, it really happens. Your scalp actually itches when you're having trouble thinking. You catch yourself sometime. It happens every time. I don't know. You break out in dandruff or something. I don't know. But anyways, the point is, you have to start them out with an opposite emotion. Then you blink. Then you go into the see, the hear, or the think. Then you blink. You go into, he forms an opinion about what he sees. Negative, positive, happy, sad, whatever. Then you do this squash anticipation, a stretch to give it weight, and then recoil for weight, and then into your attitude, your reaction, and then you can anticipate and do your action, running away, shooting the gun, whatever. Now that we've created this wonderful take, there's a good way of killing it, and that's you can destroy the readability by moving the body, and you find yourself pulling focus. You're not looking at you can't really see the face as well when the body's moving all over the place. You laugh, but I see it on every scene, on every day, and the first thing I'm always asking the animators to do is to kill the body action. The body action should be subordinate to the face at all times, and if you can do it by the numbers, if it moves 1 millimeter more than the eyebrows or the eyes or whatever it is we're concentrating on, then you've pulled focus away from the most important thing that you're trying to do, which is to act. So the best way to fix that is to hold still. See? The body is boring as hell. Now, the temptation to move the body is outrageous, and I know that it's very difficult and even boring to try to do tracebacks or move the body in a slow-moving hold or whatever. It's technically difficult and boring to do, but at the end of the day, this is acting, and the other scene is a wall of movement. Now, how do you do this in action? Let's supposing the character's walking or running, and you still want to get acting along in the movement. the thing that is interesting about the human eye, the way the eye sees, is it sees not only contrast between movement and non-movement, it also sees variation. So, here's our character going through the same take, but the fact that the body is cyclical means that your eye catches it and forgets it, because what it sees is variety. You know what I mean? Because the face is not cyclical. The face is straight ahead animation. So if you have a character running along, I think one of the guys last week had a scene where the dog was running along and turned and stopped. We didn't understand why it turned and stopped, and moreover, we couldn't see the expression very well. And so what it should have been is he should have set up a cycle. Okay, run, 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 run. Now, the head, once we have got a couple of cycles under our belt and the audience can forget it, visually we'll fall asleep on it. It almost works like a hold. Then then you should have done the thing where the head hears something, reacts, blinks, and forms an opinion about it, and then does a take, and then does an action. And all of that would have worked if we'd set the cycle up. And the only thing that was straight ahead animation then would have been the head. So, where do we go from here? Let's go into a conversation. This is now two people talking to each other. And what we have here is garbage, basically. Two characters, both talking at the same time, both moving at the same time, and they're flat onto the screen. So both of them take equal importance, and then they're both pulling focus from each other, and you have visual garbage. So how do you control this, and how do you turn it into acting? Let's see, we're on 10, let's go to 11. First thing you got to do is they got to take turns. And that's so important, that when a character is acting, he's acting, and the other characters are frozen and looking. If they're and forming attitudes, but not. It's just basically you've got to take turns so that you can pull focus. But as you can see, now we can go back and forth, and your eye is clear, and it's actually organized. Unfortunately, both of them still take equal priority. And what you really want to do in a scene is build a beginning, middle, and end. And by that I mean, just like a movie climaxes, builds in conflict and emotion, and then resolves. And each sequence does that too. And each animator should consider each scene as a mini beginning, middle, and end with a climax and a fall-off. And if you can build that into your scenes, then you have the whole movie ramps in emotion very well. So what we'll do is try to bring out some more life into this thing. 11, 12. So we'll add emotions. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Okay, he talks. He gets mad. He's smiling. Okay, it's a little drama, right? A little piece that had a beginning, middle, and end. Everything started out neutral. And okay, let's break this down. Let's get specific here. They're both neutral. He starts with an action. There's a blink, an attitude change, and then his reaction or action is talking. He blinks, he takes on a different attitude. It'd be a mistake to have them both have the same attitude. You get more contrast and variety if you have different attitudes on different characters and they are in conflict, but with different attitudes, if you can manage that. If they're both mad, it's not as powerful. But they should always be in conflict, and you should build the conflict to an intensity and then resolve it at the end. So here we go. He's smiling or nervous, and this guy reacts, takes on a new attitude about what he's heard. But he didn't move until this guy was done acting. The guy on the left stopped, and then the guy on the right It was his turn. And while this guy's reacting, the guy on the right, the guy on the left, is frozen. So he's taking on a look of horror. New attitude, this guy takes some kind of a mean attitude, and then there's a resolve, and they're both happy. And it's a happy ending. The trouble with this, of course, is that there's no movement, and there's no build in staging, because the two of them are equally, both equal in intensity to the camera. And that's where staging comes in. So, add emotions, head direction. Now, let me just back up for a second and show you. The direction that a head is aimed is crucial in the amount of intensity that you want to portray in the scene. So, obviously, the back of the head is easily the most neutral and non-energetic angle, and is used for the backs of over-the-shoulder shots so that you are directing the audience to look in the direction you want it to. The next neutral position up is the profile. It's very easy in the symbolic world of 2D animation to draw a profile, but it's by far the least powerful. You get good silhouette, but the 3/4 is much more powerful. And the straight on, as hard as that is to draw, as hard as that is to draw, is the most powerful thing. And Stephen is always encouraging Simon and I to stage stuff so that it's going directly in and out of the camera, and because it is the most punchy way to make the staging. But you can't do it all that way, and what you do is you bank your staging so that things start off in long shot and get closer and get away from profile and get more 3/4, and in the climax of your scene you have characters lunging straight at the camera. You know, the bear or the bull elephant, for example, would be lunging straight at the camera. You might not start out the first shot with the bull elephant coming towards the camera. You would probably start them further back, maybe 3/4 or something like that, and then bank your angles tighter and tighter onto the axis to give it more and more intensity. And then at the end of the shot, end of the sequence, you would pull back, more negative space and more profile. Now, having said that, let's apply it. Head direction. Oh, I need to tell you one more small thing. It's in the interest of keeping the head direction open to the camera. It's a good thing to note that you should always do your gesturing and picking up of props with your background hand, so that it forces the chest and the face open. If you grab for things with the foreground hand, it will force the chest and the head away from the camera, and you will be losing the intensity that you could have gotten just by simply picking up the prop or wiggling your finger, making the point with the upstage hand. Then, of course, the next thing you want to do is anytime you do a turn, you want to turn towards the camera as you leave. Many times I see animators turn away from the camera. Well, what's the point? I mean, you're losing any intensity, because you're just showing the audience the back of a head. So show them their face. Always turn towards the camera. Of course, there's exceptions to this rule, but if given a choice, always go for open. Now let's see if we can apply all that stuff. There's a thing that Stephen calls Simon and I on all the time, called TV cutting. And just load this thing up. Here we go. TV cutting is the classic type of cutting. Let's just run through it and then I'll explain it. Okay. The reason that Stephen calls that TV cutting is that the characters are not moving, and all the intensity is built via the cuts, and that's easily the reason to do that is because it's the cheapest way to make a movie. It's just to simply shoot it in long shot, go in for a couple of over the shoulders, and then pull back to your long shot. And you can move through footage very quickly that way. If the characters move around, or if the camera moves around, it's just more money and more time, and it takes more time to set it up and do the lighting. So if you look at cheap cheap TV. That's how they do it every time. But it is a textbook technique, and it works every time, and I'll show you why. You start out life on equal territory. The characters are neutral, their expressions are neutral, and the camera work is neutral. Then there's your first action. We go into an over-the-shoulder shot so that the foreground character is directing the eye towards the guy on the right. He's also there for geography. If he wasn't there, you might get lost. If you went straight to a close-up, it would probably work, but it would be better if you start with a over-the-shoulder shot to work in. The shot's still fairly loose. You cut to him. He does his attitude change. He does his action, his reaction. You cut to this guy. It's the same proportional size. It's just a reverse over the shoulder, and he will do his blink and then change of attitude, and then his action. Now, after 2 shots, you can move in to a tighter shot. This could have probably even been a close-up if you wanted to, but I'm trying to build intensity to the scene. I'm trying to build a big, medium, beginning, middle, and end to the thing. Now, things are getting worse. The emotions are getting hot here. And now you go in for a tight close-up, again, even tighter, and he has a change of attitude, and he does his thing. And now you pull back for your resolve, and both characters are then on equal terms. Let's watch it one last time. You should watch TV. They do it every single day on that technique. The way we try to do it here at Amblimation is film cutting, and by that we mean we try to move the characters, and we only want to move the characters when they're acting and when it's in their motive to do so. And we try to keep the cutting down to a minimum and only cut when it's most effective. So, here we go. Let's start out neutral. Let's just watch it. Okay. Now, this scene, as you can see, just by moving the characters, I've actually told you a hell of a lot more about what they're saying. You're actually starting to understand what the situation is about just by staging, movement, and taking turns. But let's go through it slowly. They start out neutral. This is what we call the beginning of the scene. You have to start somewhere, and you start out low so that you can go somewhere with it. He does his initial comment. A blink, an attitude change that we hold on for a little bit so we can see it. Don't rush through this stuff or else you'll never get it. And anticipation, so we're ready for an action. And he moves forward aggressively, and there's a recoil to give it weight. It's a bouncing ball, basically. Then hold on that pose, and then go into your dialogue or reaction. Again, he's done. He stops, bit of a hold, blink, up into an attitude change, anticipation, and he pulls back. A new attitude. I'm afraid of you. You're on the attack. So you're communicating you're communicating a lot of information to the audience about who he is and how he feels about the other character. They both have attitudes about each other. Very clear. Now, whatever the guy on the left said, it blows away the guy on the right. So much so that he does his take, he pulls back, and he thinks of something, anticipates, and does what's called a countercross. Now, a countercross is, mechanically speaking, you do that, you countercross for any number of reasons. To go to a window, to grab another prop, or in this case, he's taking what's known as a sphere. Now, what I mean by that is that if you are thinking of something, or remembering something, or referring to something that's not in the room, it's always some place, in the screen. It'll be like, for example, the high street's always this way. So whenever we refer to the high street, it's always that way. Or say, you're going into London, and it's always to the right. And once you've established that, the audience will remember that. And you can come back to it many, many minutes later. You can, end of the movie, and keep referring to London, high street. Or a memory might be, I remember, I remember Washington, Seattle, Washington. And Seattle, Washington is always there in my mind. And I might be across the stage, and somebody tells me about Seattle. Seattle caught fire, or there's an earthquake, and the whole thing is destroyed. And I'll walk to my sphere and remember, Seattle's destroyed, And it will always be there for the audience, and you can go back to it a million times. You'll actually confuse your audience if you don't. If I remember Seattle's now over here, it starts to become, what, two Seattles? No, it's only one. And so in this case, the guy is remembering something and crossing to and taking in his sphere of memory in this corner. But it could be an actual thing or a place or a window too. So in doing so, he has to make a countercross, which means that he crosses in front of the character. The character that's acting never crosses behind the other character. Never cross behind, because it's the same thing. He's the character acting, and you want to see his face, so don't put him behind the character that's not acting. Now, what happens is that the character will set up that he's going to his sphere, anticipate, and start to move forward. And during the move, within the primary character's move, the secondary character will track him, and once he's up to full speed, the secondary character will cross behind to clear way for him, and make sure that the secondary character is still locked off and into his pose before the primary character comes to a stop. Now, this all sounds complex, but we actually did it in what was the museum sequence, but now we've shifted Louis and Cecilia conversation. For screen direction reasons, I had to make them cross, and Jeff and I worked it out so that Louis crosses, but unfortunately Louis crosses behind Cecilia, and I couldn't get around it any other way. But what we did do is we made sure that Cecilia moved within Louis' move. Louis was the one that was acting. Louis is the one that's talking and waving his arms around. Cecilia moves quickly across Louis, as quick as we can, to keep Louis in the clear. And Cecilia comes to a stop before Louis comes to a stop, and we work very hard to make that work. But the situation arises constantly. So it's very important that the secondary character not upstage the primary character on the countercross. So the other thing I'm doing, the other reason I'm bringing him forward to a sphere here, is because I'm trying to build intensity. And in the TV cutting, you saw that I physically pushed the camera in tighter and tighter. On this particular scene, I'm doing it with characters. I'm doing it with their movement. And as a result, we're learning more about the characters. And we understand their emotions stronger, and yet I'm still getting the same impact by pushing gradually in tighter and tighter and tighter on the characters. So, he remembers whatever he's remembering, and in this case, I chose to, instead of reacting to what he's saying, I'm choosing to show you that, hey, you can react to anything, be it visual, dialogue, or an offstage sound effect. So, he does his blink and his facial shift. The guy on the left is holding perfectly still for this, not upstaging. And now he blinks and comes up with a new attitude about what he's heard, and anticipates and comes forward with an overlap, and comes into a pose, holds it for just a brief beat, and then does his action. Again, the guy on the right holds still. He goes through his blink and comes up with a new attitude, anticipates, and we do a head turn. And here's something most of you guys know but should know, but I'll tell you anyways. When you do a cut, you always overlap the action. Roughly 4 to 5 frames is the answer, but it depends on the scene. That's why hookups are real crucial. But generally speaking, the eye doesn't see the first 6 frames of a scene because of persistence of vision. So it's a safe bet to overlap at about 5, so that the first frame the audience is seeing, the 6th frame, is actually the same drawing that you left it on as in here. In other words, that drawing will be visually held in the audience's mind for 5 frames. Even though you've cut, you're still seeing the previous scene. And so you won't see this drawing, because you've gone back to 3/4. You won't see it because the audience is still holding that in the persistence of vision for 6 frames. And so by the time you get to, let's say, the hookup drawing, you're onto the first frame the audience is actually seeing. And then there's an overlap and it comes back in. And I've pulled back and I've done it on a cut so that we can end up our scene on a neutral camera angle where both characters are equal. So let's watch it. Animation is so international that really, at the end of the day, you should be able to watch a picture without sound and understand what they're saying and doing. Certainly, the great animated features, you can go to a foreign country and watch it in a foreign language, and you're right with them all the way because the acting is so clear. Let's get into lip sync. Lip sync follows all the same rules that everything else does. It's very easy to make mechanical, machine-like lip sync by not doing change of shape or not doing change of timing. It's very important to always look for contrast because that's what the eye sees, and that's really what art is all about, is a mixture of variety and contrasts. And so to not have a change of shape or not have a change of timing screws it up entirely. And again, it doesn't take much to fix it. All you have to do is add frames, say, to this thing. We can subtract frames from this one. Okay. Come on. Did I wipe it out? I wiped it out. Okay, never mind. But the point is, if you add more time to the big mouth and less to the other one, you're just by doing that simple action, you would be getting variety in timing. And then the next thing to do is to go for variety in mouth shape. And of course, in the good old world of limited animation, you have, 7, 8, 9 different basic mouths. At the end of the day, nobody's really watching the mouth. And what they watch is the eyes and the overall silhouette shape. So people say, well, how do you do lip sync? And the answer is just do it. Put all your effort into the eyes. And I can prove that by showing you the difference. With Squash and Stretch, same mouths, but now you're watching you really are watching the eyes, and the whole thing comes to life. And Ollie Johnson told me once that it's a good idea. He always puts blinks on the M mouth. And it's probably a bad idea to just do it for 1 frame because the blink won't work and it'll look light and weightless on 1 frame. So it's a good bet to put put an extra frame on that blink, and it just makes sure that the M mouth works. The rest of the mouths are open most of the time, and the M mouth usually just snaps down, and so it's a good idea to hold it for 2. Let's go forward. I think what I want to do is I want to show you this whole thing work with sound. Let me just see it there. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch programs. Hello. Pretty irritating, isn't it? There's always a question that I've heard, people always say, well, gee, I've always heard that you got to put the sound 2 frames ahead of the action, or put the action 2 frames ahead of the sound, or 4 frames, or 6 frames, and there's this mystery about whether it should be on or off or ahead or what. And I even read one book where they had this very complex explanation about how, well, sound is slower than picture, and so therefore you got to have when the picture comes off, the sound is slower, and so therefore you have, people in the back row are getting it late, and so it's out of sync, and all that's really rubbish. The trick is really to put the lip sync dead on and make sure that your accents are 2, 4, 6, even 8 frames ahead. And I can prove that too. Right now, the hello is starting on frame 25. And you can see there's 24, there's my anticipation. And you always anticipate dialogue. But there's my first stretch, my first open mouth, and the sound is starting right on frame 25. So the thing is totally in sync. The lip
Hello. Hello.
But if I were to, say, move the sound up, let's say, so that the action, or down, so that the action anticipates it more, the action would be ahead. If I say I move it down, let's see, 1, 2, let's say if I move it to 28. Okay, so in 28. Now I've effectively moved it to, 3 frames down. So here we go.
Hello. Hello.
Now,
hello.
It starts to feel slightly better.
Hello.
And yet the
Hello.
dialogue is slightly out of sync.
Hello. Hello.
There's a huge margin for error in lip sync. And the reason for that is that the audience isn't really watching the lips, they're watching the eyes and the overall silhouette shape. So you can miss by as much as 3 frames. What is starting to work here is the fact that the shapes are anticipating the action, the accents. So I can prove that. Let's go further. If I move the thing down even further, another 6 frames, let's say, another 3 frames, to 30. Goes out, goes in, 30. Flipper.
Hello.
See?
Hello. Hello.
The lip sync is
Hello.
out, but you don't really care that much
Hello.
because it has a better feeling.
Hello.
The squash and stretch
Hello.
is accenting.
Hello.
So let's see how far we can go on this thing. Let's say we're going to move it down another 3. So what would be up to a total of 9 then, I guess. Maybe 32. So that's how I'm going to put that in here. What did I say? 32? 33 or 32? What did I say?
32.
32? Okay, let's try it again. So we're up 9 now.
Hello. Hello.
It starts to be wrong.
Hello. Hello.
So I would say that 9 is probably wrong. So let's move it back 1 frame and see what works. So it'd be 31, right? You have that right? Okay, so here we go. Flip.
Hello. Hello.
I would say that's still
Hello.
within. That's pretty good.
Hello.
Now, the lip sync is
Hello.
right out.
Hello.
So what does that tell us? That tells us that you can move the anticipation of an action, the major head moves, the major squash and stretches, up to around 8 frames, up to including 8 frames anticipation. The lip sync should be straight on, dead on. If you have to, if you're on 2s, come in a frame early. Or if you're doing an M mouth, and you want to hold it for 2 frames, come in a frame early. You really don't start to notice things being out of sync with a 3 frame margin on either side. So you've got a certain leeway there. But at the end of the day, they're watching the eyes and the overall silhouette shape. So it's very, very important to play with the eyes, make it blink, make it squash, make it stretch, act with it, and lip sync, just make it spot on. Well, that's all I had. I guess I'm supposed to be looking at some tapes now, but before I did that, did anybody have any questions before I get into the tapes?
Just one about the tape, you're saying keep the body as still as possible. Sometimes would you not animate the body to create an opposite to the squash, for example, the anticipation of the tape, the shoulders come up slightly, and you would actually put some animation.
Yeah, and the slightly is the key word. You want to, the closer the character comes to the screen, the larger the animation on the face becomes, and therefore as long as whatever you're doing is working with the and not competing with the facial expressions. Yes, of course you want to do the shoulders and you want to do the hands and stuff like that. But if you do them too much, it'll detract from the face. Obviously, if you're in a long shot where the face is very subordinate anyways, and you are acting with the whole body, then you have to really do your big cartoony take because the character is this big in the screen and the face won't read. But that's at the end of the day not as powerful as acting with the face. I think the more you can control yourself and just hold everything still and isolate one element of the face, arch an eyebrow, or just move the eyes left and right, it's much more powerful than doing the usual cartoon take, especially in a feature animation where the Tex Avery cartoon take gets old real quick. Anybody else? Any other questions?
When you were making Roger Rabbit, how did you keep, let's say, the character acting at the same time moving straight to the screen? Do you think you solved that problem in a good way? Because sometimes the character is really distracted from the acting, I think.
Yeah, Roger Rabbit was a case where you're trying to pay homage to the Tex Avery style, and you're trying to make all the mistakes that they made in Tex Avery and follow that style and do the crazy takes and moving constantly and stuff. One of the things that I found was that you could actually get readability in the eyes by holding the eyes still. In one shot I did where, the reverse is true. The eye is always looking at contrast. And if everything is moving except for one thing, you look at that. So in the scenes where Roger Rabbit is looking at the photographs, flipping through the photographs of Jessica playing patty cake with whoever that guy was, Acme. The photographs are flying like this, but in a cyclical action. Okay, so you start to not look at it after a while. And I had his mouth and his ears going crazy. He's going, patty cake, and his face was going like this. But I made the pupils a trace back. And the pupils were the only thing on the screen that were not moving. And the background was out of focus. So you were forced to look at his pupils. And the eyes were squashing and stretching, the hair was going, the ears were going, the photographs were going, but you're glued to the pupil. And there's a reverse analysis where you try to make the one thing you want to read. In a sea of movement, you make the one thing you want to read by not moving it. Any other thoughts? Questions? All right, well, let's take a look at these videotape. Is this where do we start here?
After that one.
This is -3. You said 0, huh?
Yeah.
So it's what? Starting now?
Yeah.
Quentin? Okay, let's do it again here. Okay, cool.